Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being with us today. Today, we are on the fourth episode of the Perfect Beer Talks. As you know, I'm Can, co-founder and CEO of Pubinno. By the way, I got a surgery from my nose 3 days ago. So my voice could be unclear. Sorry about that. As you know, in the Perfect Beer Talks, we cover every aspect of the beer industry, from pop culture to digital transformation of the beer industry. And today, our topic is very excited, the future of the beer. And we have two brilliant experts from Molson Coors. Let's get to know them. I know it's hard for you to introduce yourself with your deep experiences, guys. But would you like to take the microphone?
Just a brief explanation of who I am and why I'm here. Cheers. My name's Matt Geary. I work as a senior manager of innovation for Molson Coors. My background in beer goes back way back. I grew up in the industry. My folks started a brewery in Portland, Maine, here in the States about 35 years ago. So at a very young age, I was making beer and folding six packs and doing all sorts of different things. So my experience in the industry started out in small craft beer. Throughout the years, I worked in sales and brewing, both commercially and at home. Met with Chad about, I guess it had been 10 years ago or more. Worked with him. I was living in San Francisco on the West Coast and worked with him on Pilsner Urquell and created a kind of a Trade Brewer, trade quality sales marketing program that Chad put together and worked for him. Managing the West Coast. I then moved on, sold the family business, did that for a little bit, and then joined Molson Coors as a beer educator for a few years, working with some of our large chain partners, teaching them about beer and creating beer and food pairing programs across the States. And then joined Chad's team to work on the project now and kind of draft technology and our future, looking at draft beer in the on-trade. So in a nutshell, that's me. I'll probably bring a perspective of beer nerd perspective to this, less marketing expertise and more of a passion for beer and the industry. So that's what I bring to the table. So I'll probably have lots of hot takes that won't lead anywhere, but I'll have a lot of passion behind them at least. So that's me.
Wodskow, I've been working in the beer industry for about 17, 18 years. I've been primarily more on the marketing and commercial side of beer. I launched the brand Peroni Nastro Zero here in the United States. And then I worked on global brands for SAB Miller on and off for another 10, 15 years. And then I worked with Molson Coors, managing global brands in the US, Canada, South America, Asia, and Europe. And so my background's mostly in the marketing and the commercial development of global brands. Been recently working on kind of the future of beer innovation in terms of dispense, which is a bit different for me. It was something that I was very interested in. I love draft beer, quite passionate about that. I worked on a brand called Pilsner Urquell on and off for a good 8 years. And it is one of those brands that's just best known if it's poured perfectly on draft. And so I wanted to try to move into more of a technical side of the beer industry. And so I was fortunate enough to work with a company like Molson Coors that is more than willing to let people like me push the boundaries in learning new information, new skill sets. And I've been working on this technical side for the past 3 years.
Thanks for being with us today. I would like to start with you. For the future of the beverage industry, especially the beer, and how do you see the future of the draft beer market?
Like I was saying earlier, the best way to get a question wrong is to predict the future. This is what I think. It's definitely not a prediction. I think we're going to see two things. I think we're going to see the beverage industry in general continue to fragment and specialize. We're seeing that with craft, not just with craft beer, but with craft spirits, craft soft drinks, craft juices. With technology being much more accessible to smaller businesses, the barrier to entry into the drinks category becomes lower, and that allows more people to get into the industry and experiment. And that's what's creating a lot of the new brands and this proliferation of all these different products. So we're going to see more and more of that. Now, with that, it's going to force suppliers or producers to be better at what they're currently doing. So you'll see brewers specifically either become much better at making specific beers, be more specialized, or they'll become more localized, where they can have a direct connection to their consumers. But people are going to just need to be better about what they're doing to be able to retain their relevancy in the market. It's going to be harder for bigger brands to remain that relevant with so much local and smaller competition chipping away. Now, in terms of draft beer, in my mind, and this I'm super biased because I'm a beer guy and I like to drink draft beer. I think draft beer specifically is going to get better and better if they want to retain its role within the pub. So if you think about the drink culture right now in a lot of the bars and the restaurants, there's a really strong cocktail culture that's coming around where a lot of really good bartenders are making great drinks. And so if you go into a bar, you're paying a premium to buy a drink in a bar or a restaurant. It's much more expensive to buy a drink when you go out than if you stay at home. And so that experience that you are looking for needs to be able to justify the amount of money that you're paying. And so if you walk into a bar and order a beer and they just give you a bottle of beer or a can of beer or a really poor, like a really bad draft beer, it makes you wonder why you paid so much more for it. Whereas if you went and bought a cocktail, you're watching the bartender physically make that cocktail. Or if you're buying a glass of wine, the wine steward or the bartender can tell you about the wine or even tell you what kind of wine to order. So there's a specialization around that. And so if draft beer is going to be able to compete with the other drink categories in the bar, it has to be just as premium and to be better than what the customers would get at home.
It was a lot of great and helpful information. Thanks for sharing. Actually, what I understand is the famous motto, simplicity is the ultimate form of the sophistication, will work in contrast in the beer industry. It will work like customization and mixation. In this point, I would like to ask you, do you have any predictions for the draft beer consumption at home in the near future?
And as a category?
As a category, yeah.
I think the draft beer category at people's homes or in the pubs or the home market?
In the home, I mean.
So
somehow.
That has been something that the beer industry has been trying to create from like the little micro kegs that you can tap at home. Heineken's come up with home draft systems. Ultimately, if you want a really good draft beer, you probably have to go to a good pub. The other thing that's happened over the past, I would say 10 years, is packaging has gotten quite good. And so getting a can of beer from your local market is going to be fairly good versus a keg that maybe at somebody's home that's been tapped for a little while or they don't clean their lines very well. Draft beer on its own is somewhat high maintenance. Beer is food, right? There's active bacteria, there's yeast, there's a lot of stuff going on with beer. And so you have to maintain it like food. And so if you want a really good draft beer, it's best to go to a pub. If you want to have really good draft beer at home, you're going to have to invest to be able to maintain it. There will be a lot of work coming around, maybe like K-cups and smaller servings that are poured through a draft beer system. But I'm not sure how much better that is than just pouring out a really nice can of beer. Or like if you think Guinness with their little nitro capsules. There's ways to do it, but there's probably better ways to do it than trying to come up with a new draft system for people's homes.
And maybe some game changer technologies on the way.
Maybe. So that's the thing, Con. It's like it's only this way till somebody changes it, right? That's the interesting thing about technology.
Thank you so much. So just like the recent developments at home consumption, advertisement in the beer industry, also recently witnessed game changer developments. I would like to ask this question both of you guys. I think Miller Metaverse Bar created an impressive echo during the Super Bowl and impressed many customers in the beer advertising in general. We also in Pubinno recently created a revolutionary step for the global beer industry. Beer lovers can make the payments with Bitcoin and pour their own beer in seconds. This innovation, we just released this 2-3 weeks ago, and this innovation published in 20 different languages in many countries. And what do you think about the relationship between hospitality industry, metaverse, and blockchain with these significant developments?
I think it's best to almost break it down to the most simple common denominator, which is technology and digitalization. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's blockchain or metaverse. Digital technology is going to continue to change. And the benefit of this technology, if it makes people's lives easier and if it makes business easier, it's going to start to get momentum, right? So blockchain or cryptocurrency is only as good as it is useful. Same with advertising in the metaverse or creating a reality in the metaverse. It's only as good as is useful or as entertaining. So if people are coming in and if they're seeing it, that's great. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, it's like, what is the problem you're solving? So if you think about being able to take cryptocurrency via technology into the Pubinno taps and be able to process payments, that's going to be highly beneficial to consumers and to retailers. And that's what starts changing the different barriers and the relationship with the retailers, the customers, and how they pay for things. So anytime the digitalization can help create these incremental benefits, I think it's going to change things very, very, very quickly. And what it also does is it also starts to create value for those technologies as well. So if consumers can actually use blockchain currency, then the blockchain currency then has more value. If the consumers can go on to, let's say, the metaverse and meet each other and talk about products, learn about beer, if they can find value, then it actually creates value in turn for the metaverse. So there has to be this symbiotic relationship where both parties are getting benefits out of the relationship. But ultimately, if you break it down to digital technology is going to continue to evolve now and going forward, and it's probably going to evolve at a much faster rate as well. Some of it's going to work, some of it's not. That's just nature of the industry. But I think it's extremely exciting on what it's able to do and how it's going to disrupt traditional business.
That casts a light for the future, Chad. So, Matthew, what is the Beer Championship Education Program and how did you launch it? And what is the aim of it?
Champion is about just that, creating a Molson Coors group of employees or a group of teammates that are all passionate about beer, right? So it's about teaching the basics of beer, what goes into it, learning about the process and understanding that everybody that works for our company is making beer, right? Whether you're working in marketing, if you work in IT or accounting, we're all kind of working toward that end of putting a beer in a glass and kind of being a champion of that. So even if you work in IT or accounting, your friends know that you work for a brewery. So you should be able to go out and talk about that beer, talk about how it tastes, talk about what's important about how it looks, how does it smell, all of these things. So essentially, we're creating our own champions throughout our network of employees who are passionate about our products and can speak to them intelligently and passionately. The program itself is constantly changing. So it's for our onboarding for all of our new employees. We bring in our new employees and give them some beer education basics, but now it's beverage education. So we go on beyond beer now, talk about all of the different products that we produce, how they're made and what they taste like. But we also invite our distributor partners, we invite our retailers. We have done and still do occasionally do week-long programs where we discuss everything from ingredients to beer and food pairing, and how to kind of talk about beer and flavor. So creating a common language that we can use to describe our products and go beyond it tastes like beer, right? So that we're creating some sort of language that everybody can understand and evaluate different beers so that people can enjoy them a little bit more, get more in touch with them. So it goes beyond that. In terms of our customers, I think a big important part of this is that we're working together to talk about beer as a way to access other products as well. So if our big retailers, if we're looking at beer and food, I think there's a huge opportunity to talk about pairing beer and food together, and how can we do that that's meaningful to our customers and make it easy for them to not only pick up a 6-pack of beer or have a pint of beer at a bar, but also, pair that and have that experience of pairing that with some food. Instead of just ordering the pint of beer, how do they pick up an entree or something, or they buy that beer with a different piece of meat in mind. So wine's done a great job with building a plan for wine and food. I think there's a huge opportunity for beer because there's such a variety of flavors in beer that there's a huge opportunity for us to kind of take over some of that share that wine has built and use beer as a tool to enjoy beer, beverage and food together. So it's kind of the goal of the Beer Champion program, I think, in a nutshell.
Absolutely love it. Love it. It's really impressive how you create an organic connection between the industry and the young consumers and the professionals. Their effect on the industry getting more increasing day by day. I think it's important for us to analyze and prepare for the changing habits. That's why I want to direct a direct question that has been bugging me in recent weeks for Chad. Chad, the non-alcoholic beer market is growing rapidly, and especially for young customers. Do you believe that the trends will be going up in the future? Why is the non-alcoholic beer market is the hot topic right now in your perspective?
So non-alcoholic beer is it's a complicated question, but I think it becomes easier when you start to break it down by the market itself. Non-alcoholic beer is growing, and it's growing at a really rapid rate. A lot of the growth is due to the health and wellness, which has been front and center, especially as we've gone through the pandemic. People are much more conscious about what they put in their body. And non-alcoholic beer is actually quite a healthy beverage, right? Because it's natural, it's made from grains. It's also quite refreshing because of the carbonation. Technology has allowed us to brew much better non-alcoholic beer with much more flavor. So you're seeing a lot of craft brands, specifically in the US, create non-alcoholic beer. Now, I would say it's growing at a disproportionate rate depending on the market. So if you look at Europe, where it's much stronger beer culture, it's growing much faster there because people are replacing traditional alcoholic beer with non-alcoholic beer. When you're in a market that has a less strong beer culture like the US, there's a lot of competition for other non-alcoholic drinks that are also better for you, that are fruit-based, plant-based. And so there's a lot more competition. And so the reason I say that is, as younger demographics or younger drinkers come through the category, if you're not already a beer drinker, if you don't already enjoy a beer, you're less likely to go pick up a non-alcoholic beer. You'll be more likely to pick up something that may fit the trends of what your friends are drinking, or something that matches your lifestyle. I do think non-alcoholic beer is going to continue to grow, but it's going to grow a little bit unevenly depending on that culture. So I'll just use myself as an example. Like I genuinely like beer, but I'll end up drinking non-alcoholic beer during the day, especially when it's during the summertime and I'll be out working. I just don't want to have the impacts of alcohol, but I do want to continue to drink the beer and have that refreshment. But I see younger people that just don't have the same love for beer. They tend to pick something else up. Now, the other thing that I think may catch on a little bit more is more of the benefits around non-alcoholic beer. We're seeing that with a lot of the athletes. There's a lot of nutritional properties with non-alcoholic wheat beer that actually a better replacement for energy drinks or sports drinks. And so as we understand the benefits of non-alcoholic beer and non-alcoholic brewing, I do think there's probably opportunity out there for some of those brands to continue to grow. I think it's Erdinger. It's the German wheat brand. They do a wonderful non-alcoholic wheat beer. They sponsor like the German athletes in the Olympics, a lot of the cross-country runners. And you'll see a lot of their advertising really promoting that. And I think what's been interesting is to watch them talk about the benefits of their non-alcoholic beer and the halo effect that covers the regular alcoholic beer. So that's, it's been interesting to watch the global non-alc market and see how they've been able to do that. It's been a little bit different in North America where Anheuser-Busch, I believe it was, I think they called it, was it their Prohibition? They rebranded it since, but they came out with a non-alcoholic beer, but it was built on Prohibition because that's when in the US you couldn't buy alcohol. It didn't work out for them. I'm sure they could give you reasons why, but the markets are slightly different. It was also very sweet, not very good. But anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent.
And I think it also keeps beer drinkers in the beer category, right? It expands the occasion set for beer drinkers, and rather than have them go to a non-alc that's in a different category, whether it be a soda or water or juice, beer drinkers who, like Chad, like to do their Sunday gardening with a non-alcoholic beer. It keeps that occasion within certain breweries.
Thanks for this detailed, great answer. Now, this question is going to Matt. Matt, the future of draft beer market is very exciting and probably will be unlike anything that we understand so far. Gen Z will be the biggest population in the near future. And what do you think about the Generation Z? Do you have a specific strategy for that?
Yeah, I think this kind of ties into your last question, but I think you have to meet them where they're at, right? So they're as a generation at this point, they're fairly young, right? But they're not drinking as much as previous generations. So that low alcohol opportunity, I think, is where you have to, or no alcohol opportunity is kind of part of the strategy, is where you want to meet them. And providing products that appeal to them, I think, are certainly a key to the strategy. Again, I think, part of me, the beer part of me, is excited to have the opportunity to speak to a generation of beer drinkers that grew up with a huge amount of variety and option of beers available. So IPA is not a new thing to them. It's what they grew up with, craft beer and American lagers, and they're all the same, right, to them to a certain extent. So I think it'll be fun. There won't be any kind of preconceived notions about what craft is necessarily versus what macro beer is. So having the opportunity to kind of educate that group of people about beer itself is going to be fun and exciting. How you do that, I guess, is do you are you able to invite them into the category with a low alcohol or no alcohol beer that typically when you're a kid and you have your first beer, you're like, wow, that's an intense flavor. I don't know that if it didn't have the alcohol in it, would you have another one? I'm not sure. So what kind of flavor profiles do you bring to the category to appeal to that marketplace? And I think a lot of the American trends toward beer is shying away from some of the bitterness and more to fruity flavors and even kind of tart and sweet and sour. So I think going from a flavor perspective and from a product style perspective, I think bringing in some of these low alcohol and experimenting with flavors is going to be important to appeal to that generation. So
I think so. And actually, even though I'm in beer industry for more than 10 years, I learned so many things from you from different perspectives. Thank you so much. As a tech guy, we always talk about different times, different flavors, different generation. And as a tech guy, for me, the key weapon for these times is the data. And Chad, what methods do you follow to collect data? And how do you use them? What are the differences between bulk and real-time data?
Well, that's a pretty broad question, Khan, just because everything in our world nowadays is driven by data. I would say, and I'm not going to give you any sources of where we get our data, but almost all business is run based off certain analytical data, from understanding the size of a specific market, the number of consumers within that market, and then breaking that down to consumption occasions within that market. And oftentimes companies will use that data to build out their plans and to build out their business case. We also, companies will use that to define what brands go where. So data is the foundation of business these days. Now, in terms of data, in terms of like real-time data, specifically coming out of outlets and sales data, you can't run an organization unless you have real-time sales data. Who's buying, how often they're buying, what they're buying. Because if you don't react to that data, you're just not going to be a good supplier. You just can't run your business anymore. Now, in terms of, it's almost like you just can keep narrowing it down until you're like when you get to the retailer, at the end of the day, they have to watch their data real time as well to find out what's their inventory, what's turning, what do the customers want, how do they make sure they manage their cash flow, and then how do they plan accordingly, and how do they create different promotions and programs to be able to drive that. Now, if you think about what you're doing with your smart taps and the Internet of Beer, really the thing or the biggest benefit, and this is an outsider's perspective, right? So the more you can simplify that real-time data so it's usable, and this goes back to my first comment on like crypto and all that, the more you can make that usable for the user, specifically the retailer, so they can make decisions, or maybe for the consumer so they can pay for it while they're sitting at a table, they can hit their phone and have a beer come that's exactly what they wanted, perfectly poured. The more you can take that data and make it tangible for people's real life, it's going to be game changing.
Thanks for your explanation. It's I think it's great to understand how the business will be data driven. That's the only way. There is no other way. Thanks for your answer. So, all right, Matt. The beer industry is digitalized very fast. Molson Coors is one of the leading companies in the beer industry. And to adapt this evaluation, you make great job, guys. I really love it, especially the last metaverse one. So, what is the squeeze technology? Are there any exciting developments waiting for us? I'm asking this question both of you guys, by the way.
Let me answer that just because a lot of this is proprietary. So I'm going to give you probably a non-answer answer. The technology we can't really talk about, but it's basically nothing more than one of the steps in the brewing process that allows us to be more environmentally efficient and to improve the processes and how we brew beer, package beer, and get it to trade. That's pretty much all I can really say at this point. And so there's an element to that Matt and I are commercializing in Canada, where we're trying to revolutionize draft beer and create what that second generation of draft beer is. Like, if you think about draft beer, hasn't changed in 50 to 100 years. And so we're trying to work directly with the breweries to figure out, is there a better way to do it that's more efficient and actually is built more on a digital platform.
Very excited. Let's stay in touch. At the beginning of the conversation, it's not easy to creating an experience at home for the draft beer. Draft beer is a little bit complicated, and it's never changed for 50 years. And results of it, there are many problems, both on the bar owner side, also on the consumer side, especially about the consistency. The highlights that you talk about make me very excited. Let's stay in touch. I'm very excited to wait to announce it. All right, Chad, during you have different hats in your career. So you were also the marketing manager of the Pilsener Urquell. By the way, the Urquell is my favorite industrial beer. My favorite beer is Brewery Punk IPA, but for the industrial side, Urquell. I love Urquell. During managing Pilsener Urquell global brand, you oversee the development of US, Canada, South Korea. You also have experience in Puerto Rico, I think. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
How do these markets differ? And what kind of strategic changes do you apply to different regions of the world, create the best global image?
So actually, this kind of goes back to the comment you had on data. So people are people, right? Like, so you're in Turkey, I'm in Chicago, Matt's in Chicago. We have more in common than not, right? We both like beer. We probably like to go out with our friends and have a beer. When I first started actually in Puerto Rico, I was setting up a company for SAB Miller. The difference between Puerto Rico, the US, Canada, Czech Republic, Japan, Chile, there's a lot of cultural differences, which are more around how you activate a brand. But when you start, the first thing you always do is you look at the data. What is the size of the category? What are the beer occasions? What are the size of those beer occasions? Who are the people within those occasions? And who are the customers that you want to talk to? And so you start with a lot of data and you narrow it down to the focus of where you want to put your time and attention. And then you build a business plan around that. And so what we did in every role, because I worked on multiple global brands, we always started out with who it is. We wanted to really understand who our target consumer was and what they did, how many of them were there, where do they like to join with their other like-minded friends and people and have a beer. Is it around food? Is it around sports? Is it around TV? And then we would build plans around that. All the plans would then be built on the core values of the brand. And so Pilsner Urquell was always around the quality of the beer and the craftsmanship of the brand. It was a unique, it's a unique brewer. You call it an industrial brewer, but it's probably more craft and more handmade than almost any craft beer out there. We actually have our own coopers that still make the wooden barrels. They actually ended up making all of our tap handles and all of our POS by hand. Now we still would lager beer in the cellars to make sure that the beer that was lagered in the still tank had the same taste. It was still a very, very craft-based business, and it had generations and generations of people that work there going back for the past 100 years. And so when you brought out like those values and shared the approach of who the brewery was and the people that work there with the people that we had identified around the world as like these craft beer advocates, we found that there was a strong connection. It didn't matter if it was in Japan or Korea or Canada or the US or Germany. The beer drinkers that we were targeting had those same values. And when we started talking about what the brand was doing, it gave them a reason to care. It was less about telling the old stories about our history. It was more around talking about what we're currently doing today and how we're trying to keep up the spirit of craft brewing and keep up the spirit of craft. And there was a very, very large market of people that didn't like craft beer, but they also like just overall craftsmanships, making stuff with your hands and really getting back to, the finer things in life. So anyway, that's kind of a long story of how we'd approach it. It's very consistent with how you'd want to run any global brand or even a small brand.
Chad, we know each other almost for 2 years. And whenever I talk with you, I feel I'm feed up. I love your approach. People are people. Thanks for all these memos. It's definitely mind-shaping for me to better understand the dynamics of the industry. But I'm not only curious about the global level, but also local level where we can see the creativity on spot. That's why I want to ask this question to Matt. Matt, you worked in a small scale brewery and now you are part of the Molson Coors. I believe there must be fundamental differences between boutique brewery with a big enterprise. How do you consider your experiences when you compare both of them? What are the major differences? Which ones do you like most?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's hard to answer. They both have, I think ultimately it kind of goes back to like sitting around having a beer. Like ultimately, regardless if you work for a small brewery or a big brewery, we're all kind of the same people, and we kind of want to do the same things, and we appreciate a lot of the same things. So the industry itself is a fun industry to be in and be around and be a part of. Certainly with a smaller brewery mindset, there's definitely, you're making a decision at the spur of a moment, and you're just going with it and you're running with it. Big brewery mindset takes a lot more consideration into the risks involved, and there's a lot more time spent considering every single aspect of what goes into it and what comes out. Both are fun and interesting. Both have their challenges. Sometimes it's fun to throw spaghetti on the wall and see if it sticks. And sometimes it's, throw caution to the wind and just go with your gut. But there's a lot to be said for using all the expertise that you have available and considering all the different all the different avenues to make sure you make the right decision and you do it well. From a perspective of talking to consumers about beer, I think having both sides of that experience for me personally makes it it's fun because I can relate to both sides and kind of bring a bigger picture to beer to consumers, right? Meet them where they're at, whether or not they like easy to consume, crisp, clean American lagers, or they like a big giant stout with chocolate and maple syrup in it or something. So for me, it's fun to have that perspective to be able to see it from both sides. And I definitely feel fortunate to work with Molson Coors, which we kind of encompass a lot of the different aspects of the industry, and it still provides me opportunities to kind of relate to smaller venues as well too. So that's a great question. I mean, I think I could babble on and on about it, but but all in all, it comes down to, I think we all just like having a beer with one another and having, a conversation after work over a beer or two. I think that's kind of what the industry is about.
Wonderful. Well, we have mentioned many different perspectives of a company, but I believe, especially nowadays, sustainability has to be a core of the business for getting place in the future of markets. Chad, that's why I want to dig this topic in more detail. So the future has to be sustainable to save the world. For example, in Pubinno, we try to create a zero waste industry with our technologies. And yesterday was the World Water Day, as you know. We just finished our accounting. Up to date, we saved more than 500 million liter water with the Pubinno technologies. So how does sustainability relate to Molson Coors and in beer industry in general? Do you believe that sustainability campaigns are successful in the market right now, or just for generic? What could be improved?
Well, I'll start with the beer industry in general, and specifically the macro brewers or the global brewers. You'll probably never find an industry that's more focused on sustainability than the brewing industry, because it's at the core of its product, right? So if you think about what beer is, it's barley and water and yeast, but it's primarily barley and water and almost purely water. So for sustainability has been a big talking point over the past decade, but brewers have been focused on this for the past 50 to 100 years. If you look at Molson Coors, I would say we're probably some of the best in the world. I don't know if you know this, but actually Coors Brewing was the company that introduced the recyclable can way back they started working on this in the 40s. It took them 10 years to come up with a reusable aluminum can. And it took them another 10 years to convince the rest of the industry to adopt it. They actually so they own the IP, but they never charged a royalty for any of the competitors to use it. So they shared it with all their brewing competitors as well as the soft drink industry. And so the aluminum cans that are used throughout the world now were developed by Coors Brewing back 50, 60 years ago. So, and just to build on that, the brewery is literally built over a river. And so after Prohibition in the US, the brewing industry was so worried that if we ever did anything that was seen as wrong, the government might shut us down again. And so the brewing industry has been really worried around recycling, water use, littering. So we've really tried everything we can to not just become 100% efficient with our brewing processes and make sure that we're zero waste, but we're negative. We want to make sure that we actually do better than if we were not there before. And so all of our breweries use sustainable energy sources. We have really, really highly efficient water use. We reclaim all of our water, we reclaim all of our waste. And it's something that we do promote in some of the ads, and we talk about it. It's not a huge secret, but we do it because it's the right thing, not because it's a marketing trend or we want to use it to sell more customers more beer. It's a fact of, if we want us to survive in this world, we have to have a better way of brewing beer. So it's just a core value of the company.
No water, no beer.
Yeah.
And no life.
Yes. So, and not just to build, I do work for Coors, so I can't be a spokesperson. We also have a barley university at our brewery in Colorado, where we actually work with the farmers to use more sustainable farming techniques. And we cultivate different versions of barley to be more water efficient as well. So it's like we've been working on this for the past 100 years. And so the barley that we grow, not us in ourselves, but also all the farmers that we have contracts with, we work with them arm in arm to make sure that the barley that they grow is as efficient as possible. We work with them on water usage. because it's not just about brewing. Like we have to get these ingredients, and you're probably less familiar with it than we are because we live in the U.S. right now. The Western United States is going through a massive drought, and it's been going on for a good decade, and so it's not good enough for us just to be water neutral or waste neutral in our breweries. It's about how we source everything, and working with those farmers so we actually have the ingredients coming our way. Because without barley, you can't have beer. Without water, you can't have beer. And so it's the foundation of our business.
Great point. Personally, I feel like it's never enough to right now, whatever we do, there are still so many points that we need to improve to reach the zero waste goal. And we need to work together to be successful in our goal. We need to better understand how we can improve our business better. Now I would like to jump into another trend. As we told, customizable beer flavors, mixations. Matthew, recently systems have begun to emerge where consumers can create their own beer tastes and flavors. For example, last week I was in Barcelona and Madrid for the Mobile World Congress, and Mahu, one of the Spanish biggest breweries, I saw their new innovation. How to explain? They make very interesting thing actually. I still don't understand what's the value proposition exactly, but very interesting. They sent to bar in the different kegs alcohol, yeast, barley, and there's a system. There's a computer system. It mixes in the bar instantly when you try to get a draft beer. So the result of this system, you have a chance to create 25 different flavors instantly. But the problem, for example, if your yeast keg is finished, you don't have any chance to serve any beer in that time. But it's very interesting. Matt, do you believe that trends will be going up in the future? It's possible to expand and industrialize machines that deliver personalized beer for the end consumer. And is there such a demand in the market for this?
That's a great question. I think there's a long history of customization of, in particular, beer, right? So if you think about half and half in Ireland, or back in time in England, and the porters mixing old beer with fresh beer, or in Belgium where they would take different aged beer and blend it together to create their own kind of house flavor. So it's more retailer focused, right? They were creating things for their customers, but customers could do the same and order that. So I think there's a demand for it, or there's always been a market for it. I think offering customization at the point of service becomes challenging, right? So that system that you described sounds really interesting. I would love to learn more about that. And I think right now, if you go to maybe a beer bar that specializes in a variety of flavors of beer, that customization is available in just the spectrum of flavors that you can purchase, right? So if you like rich and roasty and dark, you can get a stout or something. If you like light and crisp and fruity, you could get a fruited wheat beer or something. But then I do believe that there is opportunity for some sort of customization at the point of service where you can dial in certain flavor profiles. Maybe there's a base, maybe it's a golden lager, and you can add in, maybe you like papaya or you like pineapple, or both. And you could add that in at the point of service. I do think that there is a market for that. I don't know that the technology exists in the beer industry currently, but I think there's a huge opportunity to explore that. How do you serve that? There have been in craft beer for a couple decades now. There's been the Randall, which is basically it's just a so like a chamber on the end of a tap line, and you can run your beer through whatever's in that randle. So if you want to add some fresh hop flavor to it, you can put some hops in that randle and filter that base beer through that randle. So it's been done a lot and kind of in and out of favor. But I think from a technological standpoint, if we can introduce, real flavors or juices or other products, or create a beer at the point of service, certainly I think there's an opportunity there. I think there's a limit to it just because there are beer bars where you can go and just buy a specialized product that fits that flavor profile. So is it going to be as good as, if you're blending flavors at the point of service, is it going to be as good as that specific flavor that you're getting from that stout? I don't know, but it's certainly worth exploring and investigating. And I anticipate that there's going to be a lot of people in our industry exploring that.
Right, excellent. Thank you so much for that. Matthew, as you know, our main goal is to perfectionize the draft beer at Pubinno. With your deep experience in breweries, I believe you are the perfect fit for this question. What are the advantages and disadvantages of draft beer? How does draft beer marketing differ from the rest of the market? And what kind of change did you observe in recent years in draft beer consumption?
Yeah, in terms of, the advantages and disadvantages of draft beer, I think there still is a perception that draft beer is a better experience, or it can be a better experience than packaged beer, right? So to have somebody pour you a proper pint of beer using the Pubinno Smart Tap to pour that perfect amount of foam on top, pouring it in a clean glass and presenting that to you in a environment that's appealing. It doesn't get much better than that if it's done right. However, there's so many examples of it done just poorly, right? So they don't clean the lines. It tastes like vinegar and butter. The glass is dirty. There's no proper foam cap on the top. There's a lot of ways that the draft beer industry does itself disservice by presenting beer in that format. So there's a huge opportunity to improve that, to educate people. I think education is the key to this, but also offering technology and new ways to develop draft systems that allow retailers to more easily keep their systems clean, and just also create awareness of like directly between, what is a good draft system and how does that benefit the retailer in terms of their return on investment. So yeah, maybe it costs a little bit here, but here's the math. Here's how much money you're going to make by doing this the right way. So I think there's a big opportunity with that. I think we've seen that even in like places that customize or specialize in draft beer. There you see fewer bars that have 100 or 150 different beers on tap. It's just really hard to maintain, and it's hard to present quality beer. So you see a lot of those specialty craft beer or high quality beer outlets reducing the number of taps that they have so they can really focus on presenting the best possible product when they serve it. So I think we'll see that trend continue where we're not seeing as many draft lines. We're seeing some more specialized output, and then hopefully, and I know that there's more, as this industry evolves. It's been the same for 100 years. I hope in the next 25 years there'll be more focus on draft quality. It's been kind of out of sight, out of mind, and I think retailers can start seeing the benefit of producing the best possible draft product. And ultimately, if draft beer is going to still compete with cocktails and wine and other beverages, it needs to be better quality, right? We need to really focus on that aspect of it.
It's a great explanation. I really think in the same way. All right, last question, both of you guys. Thank you for joining. Thank you for explanation with the different perspectives with your deep experiences. Last question coming from the Pubinno side. What are your opinions on Pubinno's Internet of Beer concept to digitalize end-to-end solutions for all stakeholders in the beer industry?
So
Chad, you want-
I'll start, I guess. I would say, Con, I can't answer that 100% because it's an ongoing process and you're always working on new stuff. I'll give you my opinion on our experience so far and what I know so far. The biggest advantage of the Pubinno tap, well, there's a couple. One, mechanically, it worked really well. So like, that's probably the most important, but that's the starting point. Like, so mechanically, your Pubinno taps pour beer really well. But in terms of the digital platform, I think you're just getting started in terms of what the potential opportunities can be. Right now, you really simplify the data for the retailer in an app that's quite nice. As you start thinking about how you're going to start connecting the consumers and kind of making, like, the true internet of beer is actually connecting a broader audience versus the supplier and the retailer, right? So it's like, how do you actually create that bigger network? And that's where the value is going to really come. And so up to this point, everything that we've done with you seems to work quite well and a little bit better than expected. What gets me excited about working with you is where it could go. And it's kind of this combination of, you have a really good vision of digital and where you can go with digital, but you're not forgetting that at the very end, the beer has to be poured in a way that is perfect. And so from the line cleaning work, from just the fact that you're pouring the beer line, you're getting all the basic things done right. And without getting that right, you can't do anything else. And so I'm really happy with the way you prioritize things because those align with my own values.
Thanks for your kind words. It's so valuable for us. All right, now, Matthew, do you want to add something or?
Yeah, I'd just say from the feet on the ground or the out in the trenches, I think one of the great benefits that I've seen is just to have, the beer business is a relationship business, right? They say, and just maintaining a relationship with your customers is important. So if you know that there's a problem, you want to know as soon as you can, and you want to be able to solve that problem for your customers, right? So having a line of sight to a problem and being able to preempt your customer's call and solve the problem for them, I think is a huge benefit to this type of technology, right? So this allows from a perspective of a beer salesman, somebody who's gone and knocked on doors and called on customers and understanding the relationship, the value of the relationship. This kind of technology allows you not only to solve problems and prevent things and prevent problems, but also just to be a better partner to your retailer as well too. So that's kind of all I have to add, just from a smaller point of view.
One last thing, just to kind of build on Matt, kind of thinking about the customers and stuff. I would say one of the things that also probably gets overlooked a little bit, Con, is the team that you've put around you. They've been really easy to work with and they've always been there. So it's like, we're really focused on our customers, the retailers, but it's been much easier knowing that at any moment, I mean, you guys are on the other side of the world and you're always there. We can pick up the phone, or actually it's always on like Teams or some Zoom call. But
Chad, you can't imagine
nice
how I'm happy right now to hear this. So cheers for all Pubinno team. It's also my biggest luck. And it's great to hear from your side. Thank you.
So just want to make sure they get the pat on the back. They're better than the technology. The technology is great. You can't do it without the people. So
now let's proceed to questions from our audience. After everything that we talked so far, I believe everyone might have something to learn from you. I kindly ask everyone to write the questions. We can ask our experts very quickly. All right,
okay, what kind of strategies do you apply to underline your difference from your competitors? Okay, so this is my personal point of view. I try to focus on ourselves, not our competitors. If you can't compete with yourselves and always do better than what you've currently done, you'll never be able to beat your competitors. If you only react to your competitors, you're never going to have a long-term vision or a long-term strategy. You'll just be reactive on a monthly or annual basis. And so focus on yourselves, focus on what you deliver to your own consumers, your own drinkers, and measure yourself on how you perform with that. And if you change your plan based off your competition, you may want to double check that that's the right thing to do.
All right.
Let's see.
Thomas Linter asked that, does Molson Coors have any plans to enter new markets?
Probably. Depends on what the new markets are. So we've split the company up into two. So we have the Americas, which is North America and Central and South America. And then we have Europe, Asia, and Africa. And so I don't have line of sight to Europe, Asia, and Africa. Those are probably where we're the least developed, but we are continually going into new markets, partnering up with partners to bring our brands there.
Chad, if it's not confidential, you announced that big partnership with the Diageo on the Eastern Europe, actually.
It's kind of funny. We compete and partner with each other all the time, depending on the market.
That's the beer industry.
we work with ABI in certain markets in Europe. We work with Diageo in certain markets. We work with Heineken in certain markets. Actually, Heineken is one of our biggest partners in South America. So
I didn't know that.
At the end of the day, the beer industry, we're very like-minded. We're very competitive. But when it makes sense, we sit down with each other and we partner to make a business in a certain market. So some of it's confidential, some of it's not, but that's just kind of the way the world is right now.
Yeah, that's the beer industry, the consolidated industry. Guys, thanks for being with us tonight at the 4th episode of the Perfect Beer Talks. It was a pleasure to be with you tonight. And thanks to our beer experts, to host Chad Wodskow, Matthew Geary, for sharing their profound experience with us. And don't forget to follow Pubinno for recent developments in the industry, and see you in the next episode, in the 5th episode of the Perfect Beer Talks. Thanks for everyone.
Thanks, John. Happy birthday. Cheers.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.